I'll hold it. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, everybody. To my babies, welcome back. Some of you who don't look super happy to be back at school yet, but you got 3 weeks to get happy. To our community members, we are so glad you came. I told someone, I was like, it would be real embarrassing if no one showed up. So I'm glad you guys showed up, and I'm glad you're here to meet Dr. Wright. We're really excited about his vision for our district. We're excited about his ideas and the things that he's presented to us so far, just in Leadership Institute. So no pressure, but he's a great speaker. I think you're going to really enjoy getting to know him. And we're glad you're here. We're looking forward to a great school year. And you know, I hate doing all this public speaking, so I'm going to let Dr. Wright take it from there.
All right. It was a very poor attempt at an applause, but I'll take what I can get. It is a Tuesday evening, 5:30. I'm sure most of you, or if not all of you, with the exception of our young people, have worked all day just like me. We're tired, ready to go, but I am excited to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes with this group here on this is the west side, right? All right. From where I'm from, they used to say like the west side is the best side, but is that true? Okay. We're going to work on your enthusiasm and your engagement as we go throughout the night, but I'm excited to be here. Hopefully I won't be before you long. I do have a tendency to talk more than I should, so I'm going to try to shorten my presentation this evening to make sure that I cover all of the important points and not get off on a tangent. So if you smile and nod your head and let me know that you're listening, it'll help me to kind of speed on and not delve or stay on any one particular topic. But if you look disengaged and bored, I'm going to just sit here and just talk and talk and talk and talk. So the more engaged you are, the more smiles I get, the more times you nod your head, the quicker we will get out of here. So thanks to the Pinnacle View staff, to the principal and other staff members who are here who opened up your home to us today. Appreciate you. So I am going to share a little bit about my journey of how I started in my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, and 46 years ago, and today ended up in Little Rock. I want to give you a little bit about my background, some of my experiences, some of the things that I've learned in various roles that I've had, a little bit about some seminal moments in my life that have helped informed my focus as an educator. It'll help you to understand why I focus on certain things more than I focus on others. We'll spend some time talking about all the great and wonderful things that are happening in our school district. We'll also spend some time talking about some of the challenges and opportunities that we have to make our district stronger and better and make sure that it works for all kids that we serve throughout our city. And then I'll give you an opportunity to engage with me by sharing some of your thoughts and ideas and perspectives on some of the things as a community member that you want us as a district to focus on. And we have, you should have received a little card that you can either fill out when I am done, or you can use the QR code if you're fancy and complete it digitally, and then we'll just get the responses. They'll be sent directly to us. And so again, thank you for coming out. Hopefully you won't feel like you have wasted your time. I really want to make sure that you get to know me not as the superintendent, but that you get to know me as a human being and as a person, and understand why I am uniquely wired the way that I am. So with that said, I will get started. I am originally from Jacksonville, Florida, as I stated already, Duval County. Anybody know anything about Duval County? So the west side clearly isn't the best side if you don't know anything. Any Jacksonville Jaguar fans? All right. Moving on. So I am from Jacksonville, Florida, born and raised. It's actually where I started my career. I spent all 13 years in public education. I actually started my teaching career in Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville, Florida is who made me who I am today. I am extremely proud of my family. And so I typically describe my family as the most dysfunctional, functional family on the face of the earth. If you have, I'm sure some of you can relate to that. I have every cast of characters that you can possibly think of is represented in my family. I am the last of 4 living siblings to my parents. I am the baby. There is a 10-year gap between me and my closest sister, and a huge gap between me and my oldest brother. I can't do math in my head right now, which is probably not a good sign if I'm leading the school district and I can't. Anyway, so these are my 4 siblings. Love them to death. We are very close-knit. And these are my wonderful parents, Nathaniel and Helen Wright. And I credit a lot of who I am today to my amazing parents. I don't think it wasn't until I was grown, probably 24, 25, 26, before I ever realized how blessed I was and how much my parents, well, mainly my father, how much my father actually loved me. My dad was extremely strict, very strict, extremely strict. But he was the ultimate example of what it meant to be a provider, of what it meant to be a man, of what it meant to be a husband. He is the person who I credit for the work ethic that I have today. My dad did not graduate high school until I think a year before I graduated high school. But he somehow managed to get a good job at the Naval Air Station, worked his way up, received lots of promotions. He was also an entrepreneur in our town. And so I don't know if you remember back in the day when we used to have fuel oil tanks in the back or the side of your house. He owned a fuel oil company. And so I actually would spend my afternoons after school. My bus stop was right by our fuel oil company. I would answer the phone, take orders, and I would spend the evenings on the trucks with my dad and my uncle to deliver fuel home to homes throughout our city. And so he was the ultimate example to me of a person who worked hard to make sure that his family had everything that we needed. I grew up thinking that I was rich. And if you look at my childhood home where I grew up, it does not illustrate a home that would indicate that we were wealthy. But the ecosystem that I grew up, the family that I grew up with, my church activities, my dad was also a pastor. I was going to get to that in a minute. I was raised to really believe that I had more than everyone else in my neighborhood. I was always raised to believe that I could do and be anything that I wanted to be. I didn't know anything about an inferiority complex. I went to majority African-American schools. All of my schools, most of the kids looked like me until I was bused way across town in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I think there's a picture here somewhere. Anyway, I'll get to it in a minute. Anyway, so I had a few years where I was bused way across town, and I had a chance to experience education with students and classmates who looked nothing like me. But because of the way that I was raised, I didn't notice differences about race. I never felt inferior to anyone else. In fact, I always had a competitive spirit and a competitive nature to make sure that I outperformed everyone in my class. I am a mama's boy by heart. Although my dad did everything for us, most people didn't even know my mom in grade school because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She wasn't very visible. My dad was at every baseball game. He was the PTA president of every school outside of elementary school. Most folks didn't even know my mom. But my mom was a person who would always tell me yes every time he said no. Whenever he wouldn't buy me the name brand shoes or the name brand clothes that I wanted, he would never do it. And I still have yet to figure out this day how my mom would always find money to give to me or either go out and get the things that he said I couldn't have, but I think she was actually taking money from his wallet. But she spoiled me to death. My mom should be 89 on September 1st. My dad passed in 2013, so I am extremely grateful and thankful that my mom is still here on earth. Some of the folks in the room got a chance to meet her when she was here a couple of weeks ago for the welcome reception. She still drives, although we don't allow her to drive after 4 p.m. And sometimes I'll call and she doesn't obey her curfew. She still goes to choir rehearsal sometimes at night and other little church activities, and she knows she has no business driving at night. But I love my family, appreciate my parents, and they are responsible for pretty much who you see standing here today. I have 3 very broke best friends. They take all of the money that I earn, and these are my 3 kids. These are very old throwback pictures. They are much bigger and older than this now. My oldest son, who is in the top left-hand corner, Jaden, is now 20. He will be beginning his 3rd year at Florida State. My daughter Trinity just graduated high school this year, and we are still fighting to determine what she is going to do with her life and her future. She is a young, budding entrepreneur who has somehow figured out how to, in high school, make money through Instagram. So she is very much into all of this hair and makeup stuff and beauty stuff. And so the deal that we recently made a couple of weeks ago is that if I would allow her to take a gap year, she wants to she has been doing hair illegally in her mother's home for the past 3 or 4 years. And believe it or not, she has a healthy clientele. She actually has a lot of people that she sees every single week. But she wants to take this first year off to get her cosmetology license. And she has this dream and vision that when she goes to college, she wants to actually have a salon somewhere on or near the campus so that she can make money. This is a different generation of kids, and as a father and as a traditional educator, I have struggled with this one because she is not following the path that she is supposed to follow. But I guess I just have to go with the flow and just see what happens. And then my youngest son, Joshua, he is in the bottom right-hand corner. He is hopefully a rising 11th grader. And my goal for him is if we can just get out of high school, I will be the happiest dad on the face of the earth. And surprisingly, he is the one child that I have who reminds me the most of me. He's actually the smartest out of all my kids. He will do exactly the bare minimum that he needs to do to pass every single year. And he calculates exactly what he needs to do, what he needs to make, how much he needs to do just to get by. And it drives me insane. So continue to pray for me and pray for us. So I think I mentioned already, my dad was a pastor. I spent much of my time growing up in church, and it was actually the activities through church that provided me my first many experiences with leadership. I spent all day Sunday school, morning service, then we came back for BTU. I still don't even know what BTU stands for. And then we would come back again for evening service. I spent Tuesday nights in Bible study, and Thursdays, the first Thursday of every month was the church business meeting. And so I spent so much time in church that I actually started my first job was at a private Christian school. I skipped a picture of some very influential people in my life that are not family members, and pictured to the right are my pastors in Jacksonville, Bishop Vaughn and Arlene McLaughlin. They actually started a Christian school, a private Christian school, right when I finished college, and I actually began working there the 2nd year of the school's existence. And so I taught 5th grade at this school for 3 years. I joined the school the 2nd year in its existence. The first year we were just K-3 through 3rd grade. The 2nd year we added 4th and 5th grade, which was the year that I joined. And every year after we added 1 grade until we reached the 12th grade. And so I taught 5th grade for 3 years. I taught middle school social studies for 1 year, got married sometime within that period, and thought that I needed to go to public school to make that big, hefty public school teacher salary, because it was much more than I was making at the private school. And so I went away for a year, taught in the public school system. My pastors actually asked me to come back, and I came back in 2002, and I served as the first upper school principal. So I was a principal of grades 6 through 12 until we graduated our first class of seniors in 2005, which ironically was the same group of kids that I taught my first year in 1997 in 5th grade. So it was an awesome experience And I'm so thankful that those kids graduated because I had no clue what I was doing those first couple of years, and so I am grateful that I did not ruin it. So after that, I left Jacksonville, actually moved to Gainesville, a whopping 1 hour and 30 minutes away. Go Gators. I see, okay, I have one person who supported me. No Gator fans? No Gator fans? Who are you all's college team here? Like what?
And Crimson Tide.
So, I'm not going to say anything about a school who has the mascot of a pig, but I want to dig myself in too big of a hole, so I'm going to quickly move on. So I went to the University of Florida to begin a doctoral program in special education. And in addition to beginning that doctoral program, I actually started working as an assistant principal in the school district of Alachua County. And so my plan was to get some administrative experience in the public school system. I served here for 1 year until my pastors called me back in. And this time they wanted me to serve as the headmaster for the entire school. My pastor's wife actually was the person who started the school. She was a former public school teacher and had been doing it for several years and the administrator of the church, and so she wanted a break, and so I came back and did that for a year. And then I got bamboozled, and I don't know exactly how this happened, but the superintendent in Duval County, which is the county of Jacksonville, where I was born and raised, I think the 23rd, 24th largest district in our country, got a chance to meet him through some interaction, and he just kept hounding me to join the Duval County Public School System. And he assigned me to SP Livingston Elementary School, which was my first experience working in a quote-unquote turnaround school. And that simply means that the school was an F school. It had been an F school for quite a number of years, and so I forgot how old I was, but I think I was the youngest person on the faculty at that particular time. But I had the opportunity to serve as principal of SP Livingston. So there were a couple of important lessons learned from my experiences at SP Livingston Elementary School, and one of them dealt with ethical leadership. And this is where I had an opportunity to really decide as a young administrator, am I going to make unethical decisions in the name of advancing our school, or taking shortcuts and cheating my way to improving our test scores, or was I going to do it the right way? And let me explain what I mean by that. So there were two elementary schools in our district, one on my side of town, which was SP Livingston, and another elementary school on the other side of town that housed what we called our, the initials were EBD, I think it was emotional, behavioral disturbed students. And so these were all students who had been classified as having behavioral disabilities. So in addition to my challenging neighborhood population of kindergarten through fifth graders, I had about 120 kids in this bike wing of the school that were all supposedly EBD kids, ranging from kindergarten to fifth grade. I remember this day just as vividly as if it was yesterday. When I was touring the campus, they walked me to the back of the room, to the back of this wing, and all you could hear was yelling and screaming. And inside each classroom, there was a timeout closet. And so when kids were having episodes, they would put them in the timeout room, and the room was not supposed to lock, but all I saw was either shoes or sticks or some type of figure that was propped in between the handle of the door to keep the kids locked in the room. In the center of the wing, there were about 6 timeout rooms, 3 in the front. They were kind of adjacent to each other, or not adjacent, but 3 in the front, 3 in the back. And it actually reminded me of a prison. And the most shocking thing about this experience, and you can probably take a guess, the majority of students in this wing and in these timeout rooms and who were diagnosed with a behavioral disability were African American male students. I didn't have the words to articulate what I was seeing, but I know what I felt inside of me, and I just knew it wasn't right. So that was the first thing. The second thing I noticed when I began looking at the data is that every single year, they only tested 95% of the kids. Now, according to federal law, you only have to test 95% of your kids. But I was wondering, like, why every single year, we're only testing 95% of the kids? So when I dug deeper into the data, you can imagine what kids were left out of taking the state tests. Guess. It was all of those kids back there in the EBD wing. And so I made a very critical decision, one that almost got me fired because my immediate supervisor told me to continue the same practice. I did not. So we tested 100% of the kids my first year. I moved as many of those kids from that back wing as I possibly could to give them experience and exposure to the general education classroom. And after the very first year as principal, can you imagine what our scores were after that first year? We were F. After the first year, we were F minus. Like it went way down. But I believe, and I was always taught, one thing that my dad always said over and over again is that you will always reap what you sow. And so that has stuck with me from the time that I was a little child until this very day. And so I knew the right thing to do, and I knew that if we did the right thing, that we would see results. And so the very next year, we made some substantial increases, but we didn't do it necessarily the right way. So the second thing here, and I'm going to hurry up because this is where I get caught up in tangents. You cannot test prep your way out of being a failing school. So, public schools throughout our country, we have this enormous pressure to improve our test scores. And I'm not going to even get on the subject of accountability and tests and what I really think and feel about it. But I do believe that all kids, regardless of how bad tests may be, all kids should be prepared to be able to perform well on any test that they're given, regardless of how bad the test is. So here, my approach was all about test-taking gimmicks, whether it was teaching kids how to understand the language of the test, or what we typically did back in the day, and even still today, we focused on what we call bubble kids, kids who were on the cusp of being proficient, and so we would pull those kids out, we would target those kids for after-school tutoring and only work with them, while the other kids who were not on the cusp or who were not on the bubble continued to do whatever it was that they were doing, which wasn't excelling. And so after the second year, we made a big jump. We went from an F to a C. But I don't celebrate that at all because as soon as I left that school, it went right back to a D the next year. It went right back to an F the second year. It remained at F. They eventually changed the grade configuration and went from a K5 to a K2. And I think today it is just a early childhood center. And so I do not celebrate that at all because if you really make meaningful and substantial changes, it should be able to withstand whoever is in the principal or the leadership seat. So, got divorced. You were supposed to clap. Okay. I know that may not sit well with some of you, but it's probably the best decision I made. Anyway, so got divorced, and I wanted to get as far away from Florida as I possibly could. And ironically, around this time, I got this random email. This was the first of two random emails that I received. And it was from, I know it wasn't from her, but it was from Michelle Rhee, who had recently become the chancellor. You may have remembered, I forgot what year it was, maybe 99, 2000, 2001. She became the first chancellor of DC Public Schools when it went from a school board governed district to mayoral control. And so the mayor appointed the chancellor, the school board was dissolved. She had enormous power. There was a lot of press about her appointment as principal. And so her and her team sent out all these random emails to principals throughout the country trying to get people to come to DC. And so it was right during the time where I was going through a life change myself. And so what did I do? I filled out the little pamphlet, sent it in, got a call, filled out the application, went to DC for an interview. It wasn't my first time in DC, but I didn't know a lot about the city, didn't know a lot about that region at all, but flew up to DC, interviewed, got the job, and I remember this, again, just like it was yesterday. After the interview, she put this piece of paper in front of me, and it had about 12 schools, and she said, "Which one do you want?" I was like, I don't know. I don't even know anything about these schools, where they are. And so I picked one because the name was close to lucky. It was lucky. So I figured that if I picked this school, that I would be lucky. Okay, some of you laughed, some of you didn't. So I ended up being the principal of Leckie Elementary School, which is an elementary school in the southeast, southwest portion of DC. How many of you are familiar with DC? So if you take 295 past Bowling Air Force Base, the very last exit before you get to the Maryland border, my school sat right there. You could see it a little bit from the interstate. Bowling Air Force Base was in our backyard on the other side of 295. So it was a very challenging school. The school was surrounded by 3 humongous housing projects. Again, I didn't luck out because it was another low-performing school. But the good thing is I had learned so much from some of my previous experiences. I had the very best time of my life during my 4 years as principal at Leckie Elementary School. So to make a very long story short, there are several things I learned in my experience in those 4 years that really helped catapult me as a leader and as an instructional leader. And one of those things was understanding and learning the power of teacher leadership. It was here that I had a principal coach who almost literally and physically made me stop doing all of the things that I was accustomed to doing as a principal. I was a principal who did every planning meeting. I facilitated every data meeting. I analyzed everybody's data. I pointed out the standards that needed to be retaught. I actually drafted out reteaching plans for everybody. I did every single thing. She made me stop. She asked me who were the 2 best teachers I had in the school. I identified those 2 teachers. She said, well, let me work with them for a period of about 2 to 3 months. And I guarantee you, I will show you a better way to lead. And I was so amazed, and my ego was totally busted because those 2 teachers had more influence on their peers than I ever could. Like, it was just amazing to see how other teachers in the building responded to those 2. They began to develop other teachers in my building. And I kid you not, this is no lie. By my 4th year, the only thing that I did was show up to school. I did breakfast duty. I kept all of the kids in the cafeteria, me by myself every single morning, so that my teachers would have additional time to plan. I did lunch duty every single day by myself. I did recess duty every single day by myself. The teachers in my building took ownership and responsibility for every single thing in that school. I literally worked myself out of a job. So over a period of 4 years, and it didn't happen automatically, but we moved from a status of a D school to a B, which was amazing for this particular community because we had never experienced that type of success before. So in 4 years, we increased our reading proficiency from 26 to 47, math from 31 to 60. We were one of 8 schools throughout the entire city, not just in my ward, but the entire city who had achieved significant and sustained 3-year progress for reading for African American students in reading and in math. And you can see the rest of the stuff. So I learned about the power of teacher leadership. I also learned, if you remember me saying before, that you can't test prep your way out of being a low-performing school. It was here that I really focused on pre-K, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. I did pay attention to what was going on in 3 through 5, but it was here that I realized I don't care what you do. If you don't fix the problem at the root, many of our kids came to school with gaps, and so we needed to attack those gaps as soon as they walked in our doors. We had an intense focus on kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and literacy and math. And I know this may be, some folks may have a hard time swallowing this, but it was my teachers who decided to departmentalize all the way down to 1st grade. So I had one 1st grade teacher who taught reading and literacy for everyone. I had one 1st grade teacher who taught math for all of the 1st graders. I had one teacher who just simply taught writing. And so they departmentalized from 1st grade all the way to 5th grade so they can become specialists in their particular content areas. Before social emotional learning became a big thing, before I even knew it was social emotional learning, we focused on our kids' social emotional development early as well. In kindergarten, preschool and kindergarten in particular, we implemented a program which was called Tools of the Mind, which was all about teaching kids self-control, how to regulate their behavior, how to form relationships with peers, how to form healthy relationships with adults, all through play. And so they learn all of their content through play. And some other things that you see listed there that I am running out of time, so I'm going to move on. So after DC, I had a little life plan, and my plan stated that I was going to be a principal for 10 years, and then after those 10 years, I was going to do something else. Had no clue what the something else was going to be, but after my 4 years as principal in DC and my 6 years prior being principal in my home state of Florida, it was time for me to do something different. And so again, I got another one of these random emails, and I have since realized that these emails were not necessarily random. I just believe that they were like divinely orchestrated. So I got an email. I had this goal of wanting to complete my doctorate. I started back at the University of Florida, got divorced, relocated, never finished, wasted thousands of dollars. And I knew that I did not want to come out of my pocket anymore to pay for me to finish this particular degree. So I got this random email about a federally funded doctoral program way in Denver at the University of Colorado, Denver. I had to look at a map to figure out where Colorado was because I didn't even know where it was. So again, I randomly applied for this particular program, and what was so unique about it was that it was a program that focused on leadership. It was a leadership degree, but the concentration area was early childhood special education. And so within that specialty area, you could pick an area that you wanted to specialize in. And so one of the areas that I saw that was that resonated with me was the area of behavioral disabilities. And so I focused my whole 3 years on really understanding, really what I learned is that a lot of behavioral disabilities are manufactured. I mean, it is so subjective in terms of how we determine and decide if a child has a quote unquote behavioral disability. And most of it is really because of gaps in development, gaps in their social emotional development. And I don't really have time to get into all of that, but when you are raised and in a typical family, there are certain things that just naturally happen with a child in terms of how they develop. And when you grow up outside of a stable, typical, traditional family structure, there's just certain things that you don't get. And so when many of our kids show up to school, they demonstrate difficulty with forming relationships with their peers. They demonstrate difficulty being able to regulate their emotions and regulate their behavior. It has nothing to do with their cognitive abilities. It has nothing to do with their abilities to learn and excel academically, but we misdiagnose kids so much in our field. And unfortunately, the kids who end up being misdiagnosed the most are kids who oftentimes look like yours truly. And so we have a lot of work to do in our field to make sure that we are diagnosing kids correctly and not, well, let me restate that a different way, to make sure that we are not misdiagnosing kids and making sure that we are realizing the brilliance that a lot of our kids have and demonstrate that we just look past just because of how they present themselves. So ended up going to University of Colorado, Denver. These are the other 5 individuals who were in the cohort. They accepted 10 students. They had already had 5 the year before me and 6 in my particular cohort. And I had to work. And the great thing about this particular program is all the courses were in the evenings. And so I somehow stumbled my way into Denver Public Schools and convinced them to hire me. Of course, it was much more than that. But I was hired as the instructional superintendent, one of 13 instructional superintendents in Denver Public Schools. Denver at that time was about 95,000 students. And the first assignment that I had, I was responsible for all of the elementary schools in the southeast portion of Denver. The southeast portion of Denver was, if I could equate it to an area of town in Little Rock, it would be equivalent to, I would say, probably the west side. It was the most affluent part of Denver. And the PTAs, this is, again, no joke. The PTAs in the schools that I served would do like silent fundraisers and other things throughout the year, and they would literally raise millions of dollars each year to fund teacher assistants in every single one of their classrooms. So in my region, all of my teachers, kindergarten through 5th grade, had a full-time teacher assistant. Any guesses as to how long I lasted in this role? Month, you're close. It's 2 months. After dealing with, and please don't be offended if this applies to you, after dealing with very demanding parents who had donated their time to raise all of this money for their schools, and their son didn't get in their favorite teacher's class, I kid you not, that was 90% of my issues. So I walked into my boss's office one day and I said, listen, appreciate the opportunity, but I can't do this. Like, give me the worst of what you got. I will take that over this experience any day. And so they actually created a network for me, and I got to name it, and we just called it the Transformative Network. And so I had about 11 of our lowest performing elementary schools in Denver that they just literally gave to me and said, do something. And so I said, if I'm gonna do something, you got to give me some resources and some. Now the good thing about Denver, Denver was flush with money and grants. At that particular time, see, I'm gonna get off on a tangent, I'm gonna be there for 30 minutes and I'm gonna run out of time, so I'm not gonna go there. I'll just say they were flush with money. So I had a large team that worked with me, so it wasn't just me. I had 3 literacy specialists, I had 2 math specialists, I had my own SPED person, I had my own behavioral person, I had some other people too. I had 2 data people, so I had a very large team. The interesting thing about this particular experience for me is that this was the very first time that I had an opportunity to work in schools where the majority of the population were of Hispanic origin. And half of my schools were Spanish speakers. So all of their instruction in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade was totally in Spanish. They would bridge to English in 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but all of their instruction was in Spanish. Ask me how much Spanish did I speak then and how much do I speak now? Absolutely none. So I was in charge of leading all of these schools and I couldn't even speak the language. But I don't have enough time to delve into that. But the interesting thing about Colorado, Colorado had a very aggressive school improvement law. So when schools were in a failing status for more than 3 or 4 years, we either had, I think, 3 or 4 different options. 1, the school closed. 2, the school could be given to a charter. And we almost had just as many charter schools in Denver as you had traditional schools. The school could be open as an innovation school, and then there were 6, 7, 8, 9 different types of innovation models. We even had schools that were teacher run, so there was no principal, no like traditional administrative team. We had teacher run schools. And I can't remember what the 4th option was. So again, focusing on these same things, teacher leadership. And in Denver, this is where I was introduced to, we had a very, our superintendent, Tom Boasberg, was a businessman. He was not an educator at all, and so he had very unique perspectives on what it took to make our schools better. And we often disagreed a lot, and I really disagreed with him on one of his signature initiatives, which was around teacher leadership. And so we had maybe 5 different teacher leadership roles. I'll talk about one, which was the majority of the teacher leadership roles that were in my district. So you can have as many as probably 3 or 4 teacher leaders in the school. They would teach half a day, and then they would support their peers the other half of the day. And so for every 2 teacher leaders, there was a full-time teacher who took their classes either the first part of the day or the second part of the day. Not only did this teacher leader help support their peers for the second half of the day, they were their peers' evaluators. The principal or the AP did not necessarily complete the teachers' formal evaluations throughout the year. It was the actual teachers, the same teachers who coached, who supported, actually evaluated them. And I didn't necessarily agree with that approach. I just couldn't understand how you could be the evaluator of a person and be the same person who coaches and support them. But again, I totally underestimated just the powerful role of teacher leadership. When teachers form, it's something about teachers. I was one of them myself many, many years ago. But teachers who form good relationships with other teachers, when they know that the individual lives and breathes the same thing that they were doing, and I think it really helped that they had to teach part of the day, so they really understood what teachers were going through. They didn't have a problem with them. They didn't have a problem with their peer evaluating them, because the same peer who evaluated them actually helped them and support them to get better in the areas where they weren't as strong. And so the model actually worked great. So teacher leadership, again, the same focus on early literacy, early numeracy. Again, most of my students were Spanish speakers, but the same strategies, those same foundational skills that worked with non-English speakers, or worked with English speakers, also worked with, now I'm getting confused. They all worked with everyone. I'll just say that. Again, had an intentional focus on social emotional learning in pre-K to second grade. And remember, I was in my doctorate program, so my whole dissertation was around the role of social and emotional competence as a turnaround strategy in low-performing schools. And so that's all I focused on, was the work that we did in kindergarten, first and second grade, in terms of social and emotional development. And then all those other things you see there. At the end of 3 years, 50% of the schools moved from F to yellow, 25% moved from F to B, and all of the schools had made enough improvement to where none of them were intervened by the state. And so they all continue to function. 4 of my principals are now instructional superintendents in Denver, and all of those schools are still doing well. I failed to mention about DC, which is very important to me. I think last year was the only year that I did not go back and visit Lecky since I left in 2013. But when I left, parents were so adamant about not sending their kids to the local middle school that they petitioned the chancellor to add 6th grade. So they added 6th grade the year after I left. Next year they added 7th. The next year they added 8th. It is still a K-8 school to this day, and it has still maintained its B designation since I left. And so to me, that is a testament that the work that we did was change that was sustainable, because we focused on the things that really matter and didn't try to take shortcuts or gimmicks. All right, so, 15 more minutes. I left. So during all this time, I'm flying back and forth to Jacksonville. Remember, I still have those 3 kids. My kids are flying back and forth to me all the time. I used to have to leave on Thursdays to catch my son's football games, and it was crazy. I was going broke doing all the traveling that I was doing. And so after I finished my dissertation, finished my degree, I wanted to get back as close to Florida as I could. So I thought I was going to take a job in Tampa, in Hillsborough County, which is about 2.5, 3 hours south of Jacksonville. But they had some leadership changes, so by the time they offered me the job, it was too late. So I had to go somewhere, and I wanted to get back to the East Coast, so I ended up in my mentor's district, Bill Hite, who just retired, 11 years as superintendent in Philadelphia School District, 170,000 kids, over 200,000 if you include the charter schools. It was a humongous district, and I had the opportunity to serve as assistant superintendent for a whopping 1 year before I got an opportunity to come back down south. So I ended up in Alabama, and I thought that I was from the South, growing up in Florida. I used to always describe myself as Southern. But when I came to Alabama, I was recruited to the State Department in Alabama to work with the new state superintendent at the time, who was from Massachusetts. Yeah, they hired a guy from Massachusetts to be the state superintendent in Alabama. One of the first decisions he made was to take over the local school district, which was Montgomery Public Schools. And during my interview, he said to me, "This is going to be your task. You're going to be over the state intervention. And if you were here during the time, I'm sure most of you were probably here during the time when the state took over Little Rock School District. And I'm sure from the stories I heard, the reaction was not welcome. People weren't jumping up and down because the state was taking over. Magnified that times 10 is what I walked into when I moved to Montgomery, Alabama. So his tenure was very short. He resigned, I think 6 months into his tenure. I think I got there maybe I got there in May. And so I already knew that this wasn't going to be the place that was going to be for me. And so lucky for me, although they wanted me to stay, I did not want to stay in that particular environment. So I drove on over to 2 hours to Birmingham, where the new superintendent in Birmingham was a friend of mine, Lisa Herring. And so I had an opportunity to serve, as the chief academic officer for Birmingham City Schools. When I got to Birmingham, Birmingham had more F-rated schools than any other school district in the state of Alabama. I'm running out of time, so I don't have time to tell you exactly how these improvements were made, but you can see the how there on the screen. But we did a lot of hard work, like a lot of hard work. We cut down the number of F-rated schools from 22 to 6, increased the number of schools that were rated C or above from 6 to 7, and you can see some of the other things that were accomplished there. It was actually here in Birmingham that I felt like I had garnered enough experience to want to throw my name in the hat to be somebody's superintendent. And so I ended up in Mississippi. Now, people always ask me, how in the world did you go from Alabama, where you realized that you weren't Southern, to Mississippi, where I realized I don't even have the words to, people used to say, whenever they would compare states to states, they would always say, well, at least there's Mississippi, meaning that, we're not as bad as Mississippi. Well, I can tell you, the state, I don't know if you paid attention to educational outcomes in the last 10 years, but the state superintendent, Carrie Wright, no relation to me, although I used to tell people that she was my aunt. She was a Caucasian woman, and so people would always say, I would make up a story. But she was actually my chief academic officer when I was a principal in DC. So that's kind of how I ended up in Mississippi. But she is a policy wonk. She is very knowledgeable around early literacy and improving literacy. And if you paid attention to NAEP scores in Mississippi for the last 2 NAEP administrations was had the fastest growing growth in literacy than any other district in our country. We used to be 49 to 50. We are now in the 30s. Well, I'm not there anymore. So a lot of great things were happening in Mississippi. So ended up in Mississippi being hired as the first superintendent for the Achievement School District, and that district was created to work with the lowest performing districts in the state of Mississippi. So I didn't know exactly what districts I would have, but I soon found out that I was given Yazoo City and Humphreys County, which are 2 neighboring districts in the Mississippi Delta. And so it was here, Lord, it was here. I learned many things here, but the biggest learning for me, having worked and spent a lot of time in urban districts across our country in various different areas, there is a stark difference between urban poverty and rural poverty. I had no earthly idea. One little quick story. It's a very sad story, but it'll kind of give you insight into what my experiences were like. So I'm used to, let me tell this other story. We had one teacher assistant who was pregnant, had some complications, and in her drive from Belzoni, which is in Humphreys County, Mississippi, the nearest emergency room was at least an hour and a half away. And she died before she can get to an emergency room. The lack of healthcare facilities, the lack of healthy food options, like if I didn't pack my lunch when I drove to work every single day, there was nowhere for me to eat where I could eat something healthy. I've never seen houses where you can walk into someone's house, look up to the sky, look up to the roof, and you could see outside. You can look down at the floor, you can see the ground. I just had never experienced anything like this before, but it was a great opportunity for me to try to galvanize the little bit of resources I had to make outcomes better for the children and families that I had an opportunity to serve in that area. The cultural differences were more than I realized. You know, sometimes when people live in conditions like that, they just become accustomed and become, I don't even know the word, not complacent, because complacent has like a negative connotation. They're just, this is what they're used to. And so for many of those families, generations upon generations, this is what they know. Many of them don't leave the area. There is really no thriving economy. Most folks would have to either drive to Jackson South or to Greenville to find a job that paid decent wages. It was a very difficult and challenging situation, but the children that I had an opportunity to serve were the same as the children that I encountered in Florida, in DC, in Denver, in Philly, in Birmingham. They were the same. They were the exact same. So people ask, why did you decide to leave? And the answer is very, very, very simple. I gave 200% of myself every single day, sometimes 7 days a week. I was promised, resources in terms of fiscal and human. It was hard to attract people to even come there and work, and it was just not sustainable. My kids, I'm not gonna cry, but they would say to me all the time, like, we don't hardly even see you anymore, because all I did was work. There was so much to be done. The work just consumed me. And so I think after halfway through year 2, I would petition for some additional help and for some additional resources to help with the work, but it never came. And I knew that if I stayed there, I would probably, not literally die, but I would die mentally and socially and everything else, because I was just giving too much of myself to a situation that required so much more. And then being an outsider to that area was difficult and challenging in and of itself. So one of the first things I did when I decided to I forgot the other district, but I was involved in 3 searches at the same time. And one of the things that was going to be important for me was to make sure that there were sufficient resources wherever I went to make sure that I had the resources to support the work that I know that needed to be done. So I ended up here. That was 5 to 10% better than you did maybe 30 minutes ago, but we'll have some other opportunities for you to work on your engagement. So ended up here in Little Rock, and I am excited and thrilled to be here, have fallen in love with this city in a short period of time. Yesterday was my official 1-month anniversary. Thank you. This table gets the most engaged award. Thank you. So I'm excited to be here, and there are tons of good things going on in our district. This is just a list of a few that I've discovered just in conversations with individuals, conversations with our employees, and I've had meetings with all different types of groups throughout our city. So there's a lot of good momentum here and a lot of things to build upon. While there's a lot of good stuff here, there's also a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I've kind of bucketed the serious work that we have to do around 3 different areas: student outcomes, enrollment declines, and just the culture of our organization. And so I'm going to talk about a few of those things in the few minutes that I have left. So in terms of student outcomes, I want to look at our grad rates, achievement, and really hone in on the message that in order for us to be a great school district, all kids in our school district must succeed. One of the things that I would hear over and over again from the groups and individuals that I met was that Little Rock does a very good job educating the typical child. That the typical child will get a very good educational experience in Little Rock School District. Well, when you look at the student population that we serve, we have a lot of not so typical kids. And the not so typical kids in our district are not faring as well as our typical kids. And so we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that every single child in our district succeeds. So these are our graduation rates over the last 5 years. Real quick, I know I'm running out of time. We see a slight decrease in the grad rates over the last 5 years, but we do see a slight increase from 2020 to 2021. We see a decrease in Hispanic gifted and talented graduation rates for the four-year graduation rates. Now, what's crazy to me is gifted and talented kids in our district. Where is it? 93%. Now, if any subgroup should be 100%, it should be our gifted and talented kids. A decrease in students with disabilities grad rates, but an increase from 2020 to 2021. A decrease in female grad rates and a decrease in male graduation rates. So typically, we graduate about 80% of our kids every single year. That means there is a whopping 20% of kids in our district who don't leave us and don't leave us with a high school diploma. And there is something that we can do about that, and I was going to use the word guarantee. I can't guarantee. I can guarantee you that there are some things that we can do to make sure that this improves. And I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you'll just have to wait and see. And in addition to our African-American graduation rate, what is deplorable to me is the rate at which our Hispanic students are graduating. I think they're at like 64%, 65%. So we've got a lot of work to do in this area. And they comprise about 16% of our total population. Right, these are our math scores. And I'm not going to talk about the ACT Expire, because I think it is the worst state assessment any state could ever use. And so it says something where Arkansas is the only state that is continuing to use the ACT Expire. But I will also state that if kids are prepared well, they should be able to perform well on any test that is put in front of them. So I'm not making excuses, I'm just making the fact that our state assessment is not it's not even aligned to our state standards. But it is what it is. We got one more year of it left. So these are our math scores, and you can see how we perform compared to the state average. At the very least, my goal is to at least, at the very minimum, we should be performing at the state average, if nothing else. And so that will be a goal that we will be trying to reach. We have one area, 10th grade math, where the percent proficient is more than it was 5 years ago. All the rest are below. Science, we've got one area, 8th grade science, where our performance in 2022 is above where it was 5 years ago. And we know we had this thing called the pandemic, and so we expected drops in 2021 and somewhat in 2022, but we should be getting back to at least how we were performing prior to the pandemic. So our English outcomes. And here's our reading outcomes. Now, you do see some positive movement here when you compare 2021 to 2022. Although the percentages are still low, we can see some momentum, especially in third grade reading. I think there was a 9% increase from last year to this year, which doesn't happen. It happens for a reason. We must be doing something in order to see that improvement. All right, so we got a lot of work to do in terms of student outcomes, and I can guarantee you that is going to be my number one priority and my number one focus, to focus on student achievement in our district. Enrollment declines. We know that enrollment is tied to money. And so here are our 10-year enrollment trends. Prior to the pandemic, we were down 1,860 students than what we were 10 years ago. After the pandemic, we saw a huge drop in our enrollment, and we are now down 3,043 students than where we were 10 years ago. The good news is we are up 442 students between 2021 and the school year that just ended. And so I am praying and hoping that this trend continues because we know all of the implications that are associated with a decrease in enrollment. Everything from staffing to school closures to access of funds to be able to support programming in schools. I have no idea why that is circled. Oh, that was just showing the dramatic drop after the pandemic. What was interesting to me is when I broke this data down by school types, elementary, middle, and high, and we see that we are losing the great majority of our students in the elementary grades. Surprisingly, we are increasing our enrollment at the middle school level, and I actually thought it was the complete opposite. We actually have more middle school students enrolled now than we had 10 years ago. So that's a good thing. And then at the high school level, we see, thank you for the baby who clapped and applauded the increase in enrollment. We appreciate that. Yeah. And down 481 kids at the high school level since 10 years ago. Oh my gosh, I'm out of time. So the last thing is to focus on our culture in our district, and I put 4 little bullet point areas there, but I am really only going to focus with this group on the work that we need to do with community engagement and engaging our community more broadly and in more meaningful and what was that? Purposeful, yes, thank you. Thank you, you get 2 points. If I had a sticker, I would come and put a sticker on your shirt. In more beneficial ways, because we need each and every single one of you to help us solve all of these challenges and problems that we have. Little Rock School District belongs to who? It belongs to you all. It does not belong to me. It does not belong to our board. You elect board members to represent your interests. And so we've got to do a better job of involving you in how we improve our school district. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that in just a minute. So there are different ways in which I plan to involve stakeholders in the problem-solving process or engage them in helping us to figure out the best ways to address and solve all of our challenges as a school district. And so I will have a student advisory council that I will meet with monthly. Students are my favorite group of people in the school district. Why? They're going to be honest, and one of the reasons why I always enjoy doing breakfast duty and lunch duty is because I can always talk to kids and find out what is going on in the school, especially about what our adults doing. So I'll be meeting with, I forgot the number, I think it's about 36 8th through 12th graders that I'll be meeting with on a monthly basis. Have our teacher advisory council that I'll be meeting with on a monthly basis as well. I think we have about 56 teachers representing several schools from elementary to middle and high. Teachers are our most, next to students, teachers are our most important stakeholders in our district. And so I want to make sure that regardless of how busy I am and regardless of how much I have going on, I want to make sure that I stay plugged in to know what our teachers are experiencing in our school district and to make sure that I use them to help us institute policies and practices that are going to support them and they're going to drive and improve it within our schools. Have a classified advisory council, parent advisory council, principals roundtable, all these groups I'll be meeting with monthly. And although I will not have a community advisory council, there are several ways in which I plan to engage our community throughout the year. So I'll have 4 regional community engagement meetings just like this, where I won't be doing all of the talking. The only reason I'm doing all of the talking in our first one is because this is a meet and greet, and I wanted you to know a little bit about me and a little bit about what our focus is going to be as a district. But we'll have another one in November, another one in February, and I think the last one will be in May, but each of those will be targeting a specific area. Also have a number of faith-based civic groups, cultural groups, some grassroots groups throughout our city that I'm already beginning to engage with and I will engage with on a regular basis. I'm really trying to think about, and I keep using this term Shark Tank, but it's not Shark Tank. But actually, I'm not going to talk about it because the idea is like half-baked, and if I try to articulate it now, it's going to sound all muddled and confusing. So I'll just not mention it and move on. So there will be plenty opportunities for our community to be actively engaged in our school district. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that right now because I want to know from you, although all three of these questions are important, the one that I really want information from this group is, what are the top 3 priorities you would like to see us focus on as a district? And so we will be collecting this information from all 4 of the regional community meetings that we will have this week and next week. And this will help inform us to know what is it that our community actually wants. I have ideas, but again, this isn't my school district. This is yours. And so we want to really, I hope I'm coming across genuinely because I really want to engage our community to be active partners in the work that we do within our district. And so this activity or the feedback that I'm asking of you, please don't take it lightly and don't think that it's just going to go in the trash can. It is not. I guarantee you that it is going to be used, and after we do our last one, we will probably one of our board meetings or at another meeting, we will report back the findings that we collect, and we'll describe how we plan to use those findings in the work that we do within the future. And so that is it for me. I'm sorry that we don't have opportunities for question and answer, but please take the time to complete that card. And again, if you want to complete it digitally, there is a QR code. You can use the QR code and we will get your responses immediately. I'm feeling good for some reason, so I'll take a few questions if there are any questions from anyone in the audience. I'll take 3. All right, there's one. Mm-hmm.
We're also engaged in some parts of the community. How do we set up a meeting between that church leadership and you?
Where's Mr. Lee? Contact Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee will get you on my calendar and see him afterwards and you'll get his contact information. Mr. Lee has been with me since Birmingham. He left Birmingham to come to Mississippi, and here he is here in Little Rock. Also want to introduce, got a couple of people here. Melissa Gudy, can you raise your hand? Melissa Gudy is our new Chief Academic Officer. I had the opportunity she used to work for the Achievement Network, and you saw, although I didn't mention them, when I mentioned the coach that I had in DC, that was the organization. I think I met Melissa in Denver or Birmingham or somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, I know she was very instrumental in the work that we did in Birmingham. She helped lead the rewriting of our curriculum guides and some other work, and I used to always say she is the smartest curriculum person that I've ever met, and I tried to get her to come to work with me in Mississippi. She said, ooh, I almost cursed. She said no. She said something else in front of the no. And so I am excited that I was able to snatch her away from the school district of Philadelphia, where she was working with one of my good friends to join us here in Little Rock. So excited to have her here with us. And everyone knows Pam. Pam is the person who makes everything happen in LRSD. All right, that was one question. Any more? Going once, twice? Oh, I see one of our board members here, Ms. Hatter. Oh, and let me talk about Jeff, because I'm a little salty with Jeff right now. And he knows why, but I am, in my short time being here, I have thoroughly enjoyed my interactions with Mr. Wood, and I'm going to miss you. I really am, and I want you to reconsider. But thank you for all of your support and advocacy for this community in particular, and yeah. All right, if there aren't, oh, I'm sorry. So right now we have a executive PTA council, which is the group that I am starting to work with. I've got to figure out if this is the right group or not. But if you want to be involved, give Mr. Lee your contact information when you leave, and we will figure out a way to make it happen. You know, it's hard, especially for working parents. And I think the majority of people on the executive PTA, like, they meet during the day. I believe they meet during the day. And so, yeah. Thank you, and I had her here to answer the question for you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Have you ever danced with student or teacher unions?
Have I ever danced with teacher unions?
No, had fun with.
I don't know if fun is the right word. Actually, yeah. So one of the most powerful teacher unions that ever existed was the Washington Teachers Union in DC. And luckily for me, I've always had great relationships with union representation. I've always had great relationships with everybody, and so it's never been an issue. I don't feel like I adequately answered your question, but yeah, you know, most union members represent the interests of teachers, and if teachers are our most important group, then we all should be advocating to make sure that our teachers feel supported and have what they need. And so if our focus is on what's best for, now, I know I'm out of time, but I can tell you one area of growth and development for me is, you used to always hear people say, always make decisions that are in the best interest of kids. And I believe that and adhere to that. And in order to make the best decisions that are in the best interest of kids, it's the adults in our school that are actually doing the work. And so you can't just say you're going to make decisions that are in the best interest of kids without making sure that the needs of the adults in your building are met that don't compromise what's best for kids. So both can exist simultaneously. All right, I feel like these questions are getting dangerous, so I'm going to cut them off. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Look forward to working with you throughout the year. And if anyone needs to contact me for anything, my email address is here. That is the best way to get in contact with me. If you're on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. You can always send me a direct message. Ooh, I don't know how that sounds. Wait a minute. Stay out of my DMs, unless it's something professionally related. How about that? All right. Thanks again for coming out this evening. Make sure you fill out your cards or complete it digitally so that we can get your feedback, and have a great evening.
Also, before you leave, Thank you, Dr. Wright. We really appreciate it. But they also have punch and cookies, and we don't want to keep them.
Talking?
That's me, Mrs. And I neglected to introduce myself. I'm Mrs. Campbell Takesia. I'm the principal here at Pinnacle View. Miss Heatherly's here. Stand up, Miss Heatherly.
Oh, I forgot to do that too.
And she's the principal at Little Rock West. So we're partners out here. But please don't leave without getting you punch and cookies and take it all because they don't want to. Thank y'all for coming.